Julia Roberts suddenly freezes mid-sentence on Jimmy Fallon's show when she hears Keanu Reeves' voice backstage, raising her hand to stop the interview. As Fallon sits stunned and the audience erupts, Keanu walks out, turning a normal talk show chat into an emotional, completely unplanned reunion moment. Jimmy doesn't realize it yet, but tonight will be the moment his show stops being just entertainment and becomes something people talk about for years. Julia thinks she's here to promote a movie, but in the shadows of the studio, the past is walking back toward her, and it has Keanu Reeves' voice. The cameras are rolling, the New York skyline glows on the big screen behind them, and the studio is buzzing with that electric, nervous laughter that always fills the first minutes of a late-night interview. Julia sits on the couch in a bright pink blouse, barefoot inside her heels like she always does when she's trying to feel normal. Jimmy leans forward with his stack of blue cards, all jokes and comfort, the professional clown who's secretly exhausted from a week of bad news and sleepless nights. He hides it well, the audience only sees the grin. The band fades out, and for a moment there is only the rustle of the crowd, the hum of the air conditioning, and Julia's low, easy laugh as she finishes a story about getting locked out of her hotel room. It feels light, fun, safe, exactly how a late-night show is supposed to feel. But under Julia's practiced charm, there's a small, quiet ache she hasn't talked about in years. She's been thinking lately about the people who changed her life and then disappeared, about promises made in trailers at 2 a.m, about phone calls that never got returned because work, because fear, because pride. One of those people is Keanu. They made a film together a lifetime ago, built on long night shoots, shared snacks, and deep talks about grief and second chances. On the last day of filming, they'd made a pact. If we ever lose ourselves in this business, we call each other, no matter what. The years rushed by. Fame got louder. The call never came from either side. Somewhere along the way, that broken promise turned into a quiet shame she carried alone. Jimmy doesn't know any of this. All he knows is that his producer has set up a surprise, a secret guest waiting backstage, a legend with a reputation for humility and quiet, almost awkward kindness. The plan is simple. Let Julia talk, let the audience relax, then drop the surprise and watch the crowd explode. What Jimmy doesn't know is that this surprise isn't just a stunt for ratings. It's a collision course with a piece of Julia's unfinished heart. He has no idea that tonight's show could heal something, or make an old wound hurt in front of millions. Backstage, just out of sight, Keanu stands in the half-dark, one hand lightly resting on a piece of lighting equipment as if to ground himself. The crew moves around him in quick, efficient lines, but he seems to exist in slow motion, listening. He can hear Julia's laugh through the thin wall, and it hits him harder than he expects. He remembers the girl in combat boots and oversized hoodies sitting beside him on an empty set, asking him if he ever felt like a fraud, if he ever lay awake wondering when everything would suddenly vanish. Dee told her that the only real thing you can own is how you treat people. Then life happened. Tragedies, hits, flops, endless interviews. Somewhere along the way, that younger, braver version of himself drifted out of focus, and so did Julia. He never meant to lose touch. It just happened in that quiet, cruel way busy lives fall apart. On the couch, Jimmy leans in, sensing the audience is right on the edge of that perfect laugh-cry balance. "You've had such an unbelievable career," he says, sincere now, the jokes set aside for a moment. "But when you look back, do you ever feel like there's something you still haven't done? Not a movie, like something as a person?" The question is innocent, but it lands like a stone in Julia's chest. She swallows. For a heartbeat, the crowd noise blurs, and she thinks of a hotel balcony years ago, of Keanu's voice telling her that kindness is the only legacy that can't be taken away. She almost says his name, then stops herself. Some memories feel too private for a stage. Julia forces a smile that almost reaches her eyes. "I think," she says slowly, "there are always people you wish you'd said one more thing to, or apologized to, or thanked properly. The older you get, the louder those missing conversations become." The audience goes quiet, caught off guard by the sudden gravity. Jimmy feels it too. There's a seriousness in her tone that reaches through his showman armor. For a second, he's not a host, just a person who also has his own list of unsent messages and old friends he scrolls past and never calls. He glances instinctively toward the side of the stage, not to check a cue, but because something in the air feels like it's shifting. In the wings, Keanu hears those words and his chest tightens. Missing conversations. He knows with unnerving clarity that she's talking about the same ghosts he carries. A part of him wants to turn around, to walk back down the hallway, to avoid turning a genuine moment into spectacle. But he also knows that he's spent years letting fear of awkwardness, of saying the wrong thing, keep him from doing the right thing. Tonight could be different. Tonight, he tells himself, courage might just mean stepping into the light when your heart is racing and you have no perfect line prepared. He nods once, almost to himself, as if making a quiet vow. The director's voice crackles softly in the control room. Stand by for the surprise. On my cue, we bring him out. The stage manager near Keanu raises a hand in a silent countdown. The audience has no idea what's coming. They just see Jimmy lean back with a glimmer in his eye, that familiar look he gets when a big moment is about to land. Julia shifts in her seat, sensing his energy change, confused but curious. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny, irrational part of her wonders if, no, that would be impossible. Too many years, too many missed chances. This is just television, after all. They don't bring ghosts on stage. Jimmy looks straight at Julia, then toward the wings, then back at her, his smile turning into something softer, almost reverent. He takes a breath, the kind you take right before you jump into cold water, and leans toward the microphone. Before he can say a word, a familiar voice floats from off stage, low, gentle, unmistakable. I think some conversations don't want to stay missing forever. Julia's entire body tenses. Her hand shoots up instinctively, palm out, not toward the audience, not toward Jimmy, but toward the sound, as if trying to push time itself away. The crowd stills, the band falls silent, and Jimmy, mid-breath, freezes with his mouth open, eyes wide, caught between shock and awe as Julia slowly turns her head toward the source of the voice she thought she'd never hear like this again. The past walks on stage. Julia doesn't move at first. Her hand hangs frozen between her and the darkness off stage, like she's trying to hold back an entire lifetime. The audience senses something is different now. The laughter dies down into a low, nervous murmur. They've seen surprise guests before, but not this version of her. Eyes wide, breath shallow, armor cracking in real time. Jimmy, usually quick with a joke, can't find a single word. All he manages is a stunned, whispered, "No way." From the wings, footsteps cross the polished floor, slow and unhurried. Keanu walks into the light, dressed in black, his expression open and vulnerable in a way that doesn't fit the usual late-night script. He doesn't wave. He doesn't play to the camera. His eyes go straight to Julia, like the two of them are alone in a crowded room. The audience finally recognizes him and erupts, cheers, whistles, people leaping to their feet. But under the roar, there's a strange, hushed energy, as if everyone instinctively understands they're witnessing something raw, not rehearsed. Julia's throat tightens. For a heartbeat, she's not a Hollywood icon. She's the younger woman again, in a worn hoodie, sitting on a curb with him at sunrise, sharing a bag of cold French fries and talking about how terrifying it is to be loved by millions and still feel sometimes like nobody knows the real you. She forces herself to breathe. Her hand stays up between them, more a shield than a greeting. When she finally speaks, her voice isn't the polished talk show version. It's smaller, cracked around the edges. "You have got to be kidding me," she says, half to Jimmy, half to the universe. Keanu stops a few feet away, respecting the invisible line her hand has drawn. He gives Jimmy a quick, grateful nod, then looks back at her. "Hi, Jules," he says quietly, using the nickname only a few people still remember. The word lands like a key in a long, locked door. The audience awes, sensing the history they can't see. Jimmy leans back, hands pressed to his face, caught between delight at the incredible TV moment and guilt for just now realizing this might be much bigger than a ratings win. Julia lets out a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind that comes right before tears. You're really here, she says. On my worst hair day, of course. The joke is a flimsy shield, but it buys her a second to breathe. The crowd laughs with relief. They want fun, not pain. But the camera is close enough to catch the way her eyes glisten. She drops her hand slowly, fingers trembling, and finally looks at him fully, at the lines around his eyes that weren't there before, at the tired kindness in his face. Time has clearly touched them both. Jimmy jumps in, trying to thread the needle between host and human. We thought we'd bring out an old friend, he says, his voice softer than usual. You two haven't seen each other in how long? He expects a quick, playful answer. Oh, ages. But instead there's a beat of silence that feels heavier than it should. Julia's lips press together. Keanu glances down for a moment, then answers honestly. Too long, he says. Much too long. The room feels it. This isn't nostalgia, it's regret. The director in the control room debates whether to cut to commercial, to give them a break, to keep things from tipping into something the network might call too intense. But the numbers on the monitors spike. People are staying, eyes locked on their screens. There's something undeniably magnetic about watching two people face the space between who they were and who they've become. Against his usual instincts, Jimmy leans into the seriousness instead of running from it. Take my seat, he says to Keanu, pushing his chair back. I feel like I'm in the middle of a really important movie, and I'm just the extra with a mug. Laughter breaks the tension, but not completely. Keanu hesitates, then sits in the empty chair between Jimmy's desk and Julia's couch, leaving just enough distance to be respectful. Julia watches him, her heart pounding. Part of her wants to hug him, to pretend the lost years never happened. Another part wants to demand, where were you? Why didn't you call? Why didn't I? Both impulses crash into each other, and what comes out instead is a fragile truth. I wasn't ready to see you, she admits, surprising even herself. Not like this, not with cameras. Keanu nods slowly, accepting the honesty without flinching. Me neither, he answers. But I think we've already wasted enough time. His words hang in the air, simple but loaded. The audience is quieter now, leaning forward, no longer just fans of celebrities but witnesses to two people confronting what it means to let pride and fear write years of their story. Jimmy glances between them, recognizing that whatever happens next will define the night, and maybe define something in both of them they can't yet see. He opens his mouth, about to gently steer them back to safe, funny territory, but Julia looks straight at Keanu and asks the one question that can't be laughed away. Why didn't you call when everything fell apart for you? She says, her voice shaking but steady. You told me we'd be there for each other when it got dark. Then it got dark. For both of us. The studio goes dead silent, the kind of silence where even the band seems to hold its breath, as Keanu's eyes cloud with the weight of memories the world only thinks it knows. The conversation they never had. For a long moment, Keanu doesn't answer. He looks down at his hands, the lights glinting off the small scars that never fully faded. The room is full of people, but he feels the same loneliness he knew years ago, sitting beside hospital beds and in empty apartments where grief echoed louder than any noise. The audience shifts, uncomfortable, sensing they've stepped into a deeply personal hallway that wasn't meant for them. Jimmy's fingers tighten around his mug. Every instinct tells him to crack a joke, to cut to commercial, to protect them both. But something in Keanu's posture, fragile yet determined, makes him stay quiet. When Keanu finally speaks, his voice is low, almost apologetic. Because I didn't want to ask you to hold my sadness, he says. You were already carrying your own. Julia's eyes flicker. The words cut straight through the years and all the surface-level catch-ups she's grown used to in this business. This isn't a scripted confession. This is a man who has lost more than the tabloids will ever fully understand, admitting he didn't think he deserved help. I told myself I was protecting you, he continues. But really, I was just scared you'd see how broken I was. And I thought if you saw that, you'd walk away. Julia exhales shakily, past and present colliding in her chest. She remembers late-night phone calls she never made when her own life was falling apart, when the divorce headlines hit, when a film flopped and everyone suddenly stopped recognizing her at premieres, as if her worth had vanished along with the box office numbers. She told herself the same lie. I don't want to burden anyone. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She'd just gotten better at acting like she was, even off camera. The truth presses against her ribs, demanding to be spoken. I thought the same thing, she confesses. I thought if you saw how angry and lost I was, you'd be disappointed in me. You were always the calm one, the wise one, the decent one. Jimmy lifts his head at that, surprised. Like the rest of the world, he knows Keanu as the gentle, almost mythologized nice guy. But here, on his own stage, he sees something more complex. A man who's terrified of failing the image people have of him, and a woman terrified of failing herself. The tension in the room shifts from awkward to achingly human. The audience is no longer watching celebrities. They're watching two people share the same secret most of them carry. How hard it is to admit you need someone. Keanu finally looks up, his eyes meeting hers with unguarded honesty. Julia, he says softly, I was never disappointed in you. I was proud of you, even when you vanished into the work and the noise and I only saw you on billboards. He swallows hard, his throat tight. I was disappointed in me. I let the fear of not being enough keep me from being anything, from being your friend when you needed one. The vulnerability in his words disarms her completely. This isn't the clean, polished reunion the producers imagined. It's messy. It's real. Julia leans back slightly, blinking away tears she doesn't want to smear on national TV but can't fully hide. You know what's funny? She says with a sad little smile. I started thinking of you as perfect, like the internet's favorite saint, Mr. Pure and Grounded. I told myself, he doesn't have time for my drama. And the more I put you up on that pedestal, the easier it was to tell myself we were just different now. She shrugs helplessly. It's weird. We talk so much about how fame puts pressure on us from the outside, but we never admit the pressure we put on each other in our own minds. Somewhere in the front row, a woman wipes her eyes. In the control room, a young editor who lost touch with her best friend after college stares at the screen, feeling suddenly called out. On couches across the country, people shift uncomfortably as they recognize themselves in this confession. The texts unsent, the apologies postponed, the friendships left in drafts. This is more than a reunion, it's a mirror. Jimmy quietly sets his blue cards aside. None of the planned games or per-written questions matter anymore. He thinks about an old friend from his improv days, someone he drifted from when his career took off and theirs didn't. He remembers promising to stay close, then watching years pass in a blur of rehearsals and red carpets and guilt he never quite knew how to name. For the first time in a long time, he's not just a talk show host. He's a man realizing that the same fear that kept these two apart might be running his own life in quieter ways. Keanu clasps his hands together, searching for words that feel worthy of this moment. I think we both did the same cowardly, very human thing, he says gently. We decided for each other that the other person didn't need us. We chose silence for them instead of letting them choose for themselves. He looks at her, his gaze steady. And I'm sorry, not just for disappearing. I'm sorry for not being brave enough to say, I'm not okay, and I don't want to be not okay alone. Julia's face crumples for just a second before she gathers herself. The cameras catch it, the raw, unfiltered pain of someone who spent years pretending not to miss what she clearly did. I'm sorry too, she whispers, for letting my pride be louder than my heart. She laughs softly through the emotion, shaking her head. We always played these fearless people on screen, people who run into burning buildings, chase bad guys, confess their love in the rain. And in real life, we were too afraid to pick up a phone. The audience sighs collectively, a wave of empathy rolling through the room. The band leader, usually ready with a rim shot, simply watches, moved. This is the twist no one expected. The big, surprise guest bit has turned into a masterclass in humility, courage, and the quiet heroism of admitting you were wrong. The suspense isn't about who will walk through the curtain anymore. It's about whether these two will find a way to forgive each other and themselves in front of millions. Jimmy leans forward, his voice low, almost reverent. "Can I ask something?" he says, looking between them. "If you had called back then when it was darkest, what's one thing you wish the other had said?" It's a dangerous question, the kind that could reopen wounds or finally let them breathe. The studio seems to shrink around it, waiting. Julia stares at Keanu, suddenly looking more fragile than any role she's ever played. Keanu inhales slowly, as if diving underwater, and opens his mouth to answer. But before he can speak, a shaky laugh escapes Julia as she blurts out something so unexpected it makes even him blink in surprise. What they needed to hear. "I wish you," Dee said. "You don't have to be the strong one tonight," Julia blurts out, then laughs at herself, wiping under her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because I was exhausted from pretending I had it all together. Everywhere I went, people kept saying, 'You're fine, you're Julia Roberts, you always land on your feet.' And I remember thinking, I'm not a cat, I'm a person. I don't want to land on my feet. I want someone to sit with me on the floor." The line sparks a warm ripple of laughter, but there's a catch in it, a recognition of how often people with perfect lives are quietly drowning. Keanu listens, his eyes softening with every word. "I would have sat on the floor with you," he says quietly. "I didn't know how to say that without sounding, I don't know, needy, dramatic." He exhales, a little embarrassed by his own honesty. "I thought I was supposed to be this unshakable rock for everyone, like, he's so zen, he's so calm, he's so grounded. But that wasn't strength. That was me hiding. I wish I'd called and said, 'Listen, my life is a mess. Can I be a mess with you?'" The audience goes still, then breaks into applause, short at first, then growing as people recognize the courage in those words. Jimmy sits back, a hand pressed over his heart as if steadying himself. "Man," he whispers, half to the crowd and half to himself, "we do that, don't we? We all do that. We think the people who seem okay don't need us. Or we think we're supposed to be the comic relief, the strong one, the successful one, anything except honest." He shakes his head, thinking of his own life off-set. The evenings he's laughed the loudest on camera after crying in his dressing room an hour earlier. Julia turns to him, grateful for the shared vulnerability. "You must feel it a lot," she says. "You're the funny guy. People forget you might be the one who needs the joke most." The crowd murmurs in agreement. It's a simple statement, but it opens up the space even more. Suddenly, it isn't just about two old friends reconnecting. It's about the roles everyone gets trapped in: hero, clown, success story, strong one, and how those labels quietly choke their real selves. "Yeah," Jimmy admits, his voice lower, his usual polish stripped away. "I hide behind this desk sometimes. Behind the games, the bands, the sketches. It's easier to give everyone a fun night than it is to say, 'Hey, I'm scared I'm not enough when the lights go off.'" He glances toward the audience, then back at Julia and Keanu. "I think I forgot that people might actually want the truth as much as they want the jokes." Keanu nods, absorbing Jimmy's confession. "You know what I think we all forget," he says. "That asking for help is also a way of giving something. It's like saying, 'I trust you with the unpolished version of me.' That's a weird kind of gift, but we're so busy trying not to be a burden that we rob people of the chance to show up." He turns to Julia. "I didn't call because I thought I'd only bring you grief. I never thought maybe you needed to know you weren't the only one falling apart." Julia lets those words sink in. For years, she has carried this private suspicion that her loneliness was proof of some failure hidden inside her, that truly lovable people didn't end up isolated at the top. Hearing him describe the same isolation with that same aching honesty hits her like a door opening. "I wish I had known that then," she says quietly. "Because I coped by building walls. If people hurt me, I turned them into stories. If I missed someone, I turned them into a joke. I didn't realize every joke about my own heart was another brick." The room is utterly silent now, but it doesn't feel empty, it feels full. Full of unspoken apologies, of old messages unsent, of parents, siblings, lovers, friends that everyone suddenly remembers. This isn't the kind of content the network usually chases, but even the executives watching from their offices can't look away. It's as if the show has slipped out of the entertainment lane and into something more dangerous, more necessary. Jimmy leans on his desk, his voice tentative. "So, what do you do?" he asks. "When you wake up one day and realize you've built so many walls there's no door left." It's not a polished talk show question. It's a late night, 3 a.m. kind of question, the kind that usually lives in group chats and journal pages, not on national television. He looks at them like a student looks at teachers who have lived through the fire and come out the other side. Keanu takes a breath, considering. "You stop waiting for someone to knock," he says slowly. "You start tearing down the wall from your side, one brick at a time. You make the first call. You send the first text. You say the first 'I'm sorry' or 'I miss you' or 'I'm not okay.' Even if your voice shakes, especially if it shakes." He pauses, eyes going distant for a moment. "And if the person doesn't answer or they can't meet you where you are, then at least you know. You didn't let fear be the author of that chapter." Julia looks at him like she's seeing him for the first time and also remembering exactly why she trusted him all those years ago. "You know," she says softly, "I actually tried to dial your number once, years ago. I stared at the screen until the digits blurred, and then I convinced myself you de-changed, that you weren't the same guy who once spent an entire lunch break listening to me rant about my family without checking his watch once." She smiles sadly. "I changed the story in my head, so I wouldn't have to face the truth that I was just scared." Keanu's brow furrows. "You were scared of me?" he asks, genuinely surprised. Julia shakes her head. "No, I was scared of what it would mean if you didn't pick up." The confession hangs between them, fragile and searing. The audience inhales as one, every person thinking of a number they haven't dialed for exactly that reason. For a long second, nobody speaks. The cameras capture the three of them sitting there, two world-famous actors and one late-night legend, suddenly stripped down to their truest selves. It's a strange, almost sacred stillness. Then Keanu leans in, his voice steady, his eyes gentle but fierce. "Julia," he says, "my phone would have rung in an empty room and I would have come running. I can't change that I didn't call you first, but I can choose what I do next." He glances briefly at Jimmy, then back at her. "If you ever need someone to sit on the floor with you again, you don't have to wonder. Just call." Something breaks inside her, but in a good way, like a tight knot finally loosening. Tears spill over, and this time she doesn't hide them. She laughs through them instead, shaking her head in disbelief at how many years she lost to a fear that looks so small from this distance. The audience begins to clap again, but it's softer now, more like a standing beside than a celebration. They're not cheering for celebrities. They're cheering for courage. Jimmy watches, moved to the point where his usual commentary deserts him. He looks out at the crowd, then back at them. "You know," he says, his voice rougher than before, "we didn't plan for this. We thought this would be a cute surprise. Hey, look, they did a movie together once. But this," he gestures between them, "this feels important. Like maybe somebody at home needed to see two people admit they were wrong and still choose each other again." Julia nods, wiping her cheeks. "Yeah," she says quietly, "because if we can do it up here with all these lights and cameras and millions of people watching, then maybe somebody can do it in a living room tonight, or in a hospital hallway, or in a parking lot, sitting in their car, staring at a number and wondering if it's too late." She glances toward the crowd, her gaze filled with something softer than performance. "I hope someone's brave enough to make that call after this." Keanu leans back, exhaling slowly. For the first time since he walked on stage, he looks lighter, not because everything is fixed, but because something finally got named. "I think the bravest people," he says, "aren't the ones who jump off buildings in movies. They're the ones who say, 'I miss you' first." A murmur of agreement rolls through the audience like a quiet wave. Jimmy glances at the clock the producers are frantically pointing to from the sidelines. They're way over time. Segments have to be cut. Advertisers will be furious. But he can't bring himself to drop back into scripted banter yet. He feels like they're standing at the edge of something that could change more than just tonight's ratings. "We do have to go to a break," he says reluctantly, "but I don't want to lose this. When we come back, if you're both okay with it, I want to ask you something big. Something I think a lot of people at home, are asking themselves right now. He looks into the main camera, for once not trying to charm it, just speak through it. If you've hurt someone, or you've gone silent, or you're sure it's too late, is there such a thing as too late for forgiveness? The band starts to play them out, the familiar theme music suddenly tinged with a strange, aching hope. As the screen fades to black and millions of viewers sit with the question, hearts pounding, wondering what these three will say when the cameras come back on. Is it ever too late? When the show returns from commercial, the studio looks the same, bright lights, glossy desk, skyline glowing behind them, but the energy has completely changed. The laughter that usually greets the comeback is softer, almost hesitant, like everyone knows they're stepping back into a conversation that matters. Jimmy's smile is there, but his eyes are serious as he leans into the microphone. "We're back," he says, "and we're just going to pick up exactly where we left off." Julia and Keanu exchange a look, a silent check-in. "Are you okay? Are we really doing this?" Both of them give the smallest of nods. The walls that once stood tall between them feel more like rubble now, messy but no longer impassable. Julia tucks her hair behind her ear, grounding herself with the familiar habit. Keanu rolls his shoulders back, as if shrugging off the weight of an invisible armor he doesn't need anymore. "So," Jimmy says, folding his hands to stop them from fidgeting, "before the break I asked if you think it can ever be too late for forgiveness. And I don't mean just saying sorry because a camera S on you. I mean real soul-level forgiveness. The kind that lets you move forward instead of replaying the same scene for the rest of your life." He glances from Julia to Keanu. "You two have actually lived through this, tonight, with each other. What do you think?" Julia inhales slowly, feeling the weight of the question. She thinks of the years she spent quietly resenting him for not calling, while never calling herself. She thinks of the people she's cut out of her own life, because their presence reminded her of versions of herself she'd rather erase. "I used to think there was an expiration date," she says. "Like, if enough time passed, the other person was obligated to move on. And if I came back after that, I'd just be reopening a wound they'd finally managed to scar over." She looks down at her hands for a moment, then back up. "But sitting here now, I realize the wound doesn't always close. It just gets buried. And sometimes forgiveness is like letting sunlight touch it for the first time so it can actually heal." Keanu nods thoughtfully. "I don't think it's ever too late to ask for forgiveness," he says, "but I do think it might be too late to control what the answer is." His words land with a quiet, sobering power. You can come back after 10 years, 20 years, a lifetime and say, "I'm sorry," but you don't get to demand, "I forgive you" in return. That part belongs to them. He glances at Julia, grateful. "Tonight, I'm lucky. You're letting me back into your story a little, but if you hadn't, that would have been my consequence for waiting so long." The honesty in that statement hits Jimmy hard. He thinks of the friend he hasn't spoken to in years, of the text thread that stopped mid-joke and never revived. "So what you're saying," Jimmy says slowly, "is it's never too late to do the right thing, but you don't get to decide what right looks like for the other person." Keanu smiles faintly. "Exactly. Forgiveness is a gift, not a receipt." Julia tilts her head, considering. "I think," she adds, "that sometimes forgiveness isn't about putting the relationship back the way it was. Sometimes it's just about putting yourself back together, saying, 'I won't let this old pain dictate who I am now.' I'm discovering that tonight. I'm forgiving you for the silence, but I'm also forgiving me for the stories I told myself about why you were silent." She rests a hand against her chest briefly. That part might be the hardest. The audience hums with low murmurs of agreement. Faces glisten under the lights. Even the camera operators look moved. There's a sense in the room that something is shifting, not just between the three people on stage, but in the minds of everyone watching, live and at home. This isn't the slick, forgettable content that will be replaced tomorrow. This is the kind that lingers, that sends people outside to sit in their cars with their phones in their hands, deciding. Jimmy leans toward the camera, suddenly aware of how many eyes are on them. "If you're watching this," he says quietly, "and there's someone you need to talk to, someone you hurt or someone who hurt you, don't wait for this perfect, dramatic moment. It probably won't look like a TV reunion with applause and nice lighting. It might look like an awkward text at 1 a.m. or a voicemail that starts with, "You're probably going to delete this, but do it anyway." Because if these two can sit here and own their part with the whole world watching, you can do it in private, with just one person. Keanu turns to Julia, a small, hopeful smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Can I ask you something?" he says. "Honestly." She nods, bracing herself but open. "If I had called back then, if I'd been brave sooner, do you think it would have changed anything? About who you became? About how you learned to stand up on your own?" Julia thinks about it, really thinks. It would be easy to say yes, to imagine that one phone call could have rewritten the darkest chapters of her life. But the woman sitting on this couch now is no longer a scared 20-something leaning on everyone else for definition. She's weathered storms, made mistakes, learned to breathe under the weight of the expectations piled on her name. "I think," she says slowly, "I still would have fallen apart. I still would have made bad choices. I still would have had nights where I didn't recognize the person in the mirror. But maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone doing it." She looks at him, eyes earnest. "And maybe that's enough. Maybe the point of having people isn't to stop you from breaking. Maybe it's just to remind you you're not the only one who does." Her voice softens, filled with hard-won tenderness. "So no, you wouldn't have saved me, and I wouldn't have saved you, but we could have survived side by side instead of separately, and that's what I regret." The truth in that hits Keanu like a slow, steady wave. He nods, taking it in without flinching away. "Then maybe," he says, "that's what we do now. We don't pretend we can fix each other. We just promise not to disappear when it's ugly." He glances down at the edge of the desk where his hand rests. "I can't rewrite the years we lost, but I can show up for the years we still have." The room erupts into applause again, stronger this time, fueled by relief and hope. Jimmy stands halfway out of his chair, clapping along, his eyes bright. That's it," he says, voice thick. "That's the thing. You can't go back and edit the old episodes of your life, but you can absolutely change what gets written from here on out." Julia laughs softly, wiping her face one more time. "Can we please do something ridiculous now?" she asks, half teasing, half pleading. "Like a stupid game where I have to guess movie quotes while doing push-ups or something, because my mascara's about to officially give up on me." The crowd laughs, grateful for the release. Jimmy seizes the cue. Yes, we absolutely can," he says, grinning. "But after this show, I'm making one phone call I should have made a long time ago, and if you're watching, I hope you will too." He looks between Julia and Keanu, his tone playful again, but with that newly forged sincerity underneath. "And you too, don't you dare just say, 'We should talk,' and then disappear for another decade. We're all invested now." Julia smiles, a real luminous smile that reaches her eyes. "Deal," she says, extending her hand toward Keanu. He doesn't hesitate. He takes it, warm and steady, fingers curling around hers in a quiet agreement that says more than 100 public statements ever could. The audience roars, cameras flashing as if trying to capture not just the image, but the unseen promise hanging in the air. They're about to stand for the silly game Jimmy's crew is frantically setting up when a stagehand rushes over and whispers something into Jimmy's ear, something that makes his eyebrows shoot up with surprise and a new glint of possibility. He turns back to the camera, barely containing a grin. "Okay," he says. "So, apparently there's one more person backstage who just heard all of this and asked if they could come out for a minute. Someone connected to both of you. And honestly, after tonight, I don't think we can say no." The audience gasps, half excited, half shocked, as Julia and Keanu exchange puzzled, wary looks. They've already walked through one door they never expected to open again. Now, with hearts still raw and hands still joined, they turn toward the curtain, bracing for whoever, and whatever is about to step into the light next.